Everyone. I'm Nancy Roman, President and CEO of Partnership for a Healthier America. And I'm so glad you could be here today for a conversation with this terrific panel about those first foods and children's health and the future of the baby and toddler food landscape. Together with our partners, PHA is on a journey to raise a generation of children who love vegetables. And it's so important because vegetables are both underconsumed and they are also underrepresented in the commercial marketplace for toddler food and infant food. In January this year, we released a white paper concluding that the best chance we have of developing lifelong healthy eaters is through early introduction of vegetables. And the paper also underscores the shortcomings of vegetable offerings for infants and toddlers in the current marketplace. So at PHA, we're convening industry leaders, medical professionals, and early childhood educators to transform the food landscape for our nation's youngest eaters. As part of that effort, we're offering consumers a new, reliable indicator so they and you know that the products labeled vegetables are actually containing vegetables in significant quantities. And we're also calling on brands and organizations to prioritize a veggie-forward approach. I'm super proud to recognize 8 companies today that are paving the way for the new marketplace standard. They are Happy Family Organics, Kinder Care Education, Learning Care Group, Little Gourmets, Nurture Life, Square Baby, Tiny Organics, and Yummy. By adopting PHA's Veggies Early and Often icon on food packaging and on childcare menus, these companies are making a super big difference. Parents and other caregivers can now figure out which so-called vegetables are actually vegetables. We're really eager to expand this effort because we believe a strong and resilient food system does require innovation and change. So here today to talk with us about how the food industry can help parents and caregivers in our efforts to raise adventurous veggie-loving eaters are 5 accomplished leaders from journalism, retail, pediatrics, manufacturing, and nutrition science. So first, I'd like to welcome today's moderator, Mary Ellen Shupe. Mary Ellen is Senior Correspondent for Food Navigator USA and NutriGredients USA, where she provides daily news analysis for decision makers in the consumer packaged good industry. So she really gets this space. Thank you, Mary Ellen. And second, it's a real pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Dariush Mozaffarian. Dari is a cardiologist. He's also the dean at Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy. As someone who's worked a huge part of my career to attempt to transform the food system myself, I can honestly say that Dari may be the most influential individual in this space. He touches every arm of the Food and Health Connect, and Thomson Reuters has named him one of the world's most influential scientific minds. So Dari, it's a real pleasure to have you here with us as we consider what's at stake for our children's health and our food system. Thank you.
Absolutely pleased to be here. I'll open with some general broad views of what I think is going on with nutrition science and food systems and the importance of vegetables, as particularly for young children. Next slide, please. So, it's really striking how sick we have become as a country and how new this is. This is really just over the last 30 or 40 years. More American adults today are sick than are healthy. 1 in 2 adults have diabetes or prediabetes, and 3 in 4 have overweight or obesity. And if you look at kind of general metabolic health, only 1 in 10 American adults are actually metabolically healthy. 9 in 10 have 1 or more diet-related metabolic abnormality. And that's adults. If you just go to teenagers, right? Teenagers who should be really healthy and just about to enter the most productive times of their lives 1 in 4 American teenagers already has prediabetes, 1 in 4 already has overweight or obesity, and 1 in 6 has fatty liver disease. I mean, just shocking statistics for the future of our country. Next slide. And if you put all this together, this is not just causing human suffering, it's causing economic catastrophe. So this was a nice analysis by the Rockefeller Foundation, looking at the true cost of food, not just what we spend, but the cost for human health and for the environment and human livelihoods. And what the Rockefeller Foundation analysis concluded is that we spend about $1.1 trillion in the food system in the United States on direct spending, but that in addition to that 1.1 trillion, our economy loses another 2.1 trillion in excess costs, about half of that due to lost human productivity and healthcare spending due to diet-related disease, and about half due to challenges to poverty, the environment, and biodiversity. So for every dollar we spend, our economy loses $2. Clearly, we need disruption in industry so that instead of spending $1 on food and losing $2 in our economy, we spend $1 on food and we gain productivity and reduce better health in our economy. Next slide. And so what's going on with US children? Well, first, there's some good news. This chart looks at overall diet quality in the United States over about the last 20 years. And in orange, you see the percentage of kids who have poor diet quality has actually gone down from about 77% to 56%. And that's mostly been because kids who have intermediate diet quality has gone up. Ideal diet quality is still less than 1%. We know very few kids have an ideal diet. But overall, there's actually been some improvement. Of course, still 56% of kids today still have poor diets. That's terrible. Now, how has this happened? It's important to see, why this has happened. Next slide, please. So if you look at different components of a healthy diet, you see one thing that's happened is whole grain intake has gone up from about half a serving per day to about a serving per day. So it's doubled. That's been an improvement. Unfortunately, refined grain intake has not gone down. And so there's still way too much refined starchy intake in the United States among children. The biggest improvement, one of the biggest improvements, has been from sugar-sweetened beverages. Sugar-sweetened beverage intake has gone down dramatically in the United States among kids from an average of 2 servings per day to 1 serving per day. And that's also led to a reduction in added sugars. Next slide. And whole fruit intake has gone up as well, as you can see from this chart, from about 0.4, 0.5 servings per day to about 0.7 servings per day. Still much too low. Kids should be eating 1 or 2 servings of whole fruits per day, but it's improved. But on the other hand, thinking about vegetables, look at the chart for vegetables. No improvement essentially in vegetable intake in the United States among children. The top vegetable consumed is white potatoes, which isn't as nutritionally rich as many of the other vegetables, and some of the most nutritionally rich vegetables like red and orange vegetables, dark green vegetables, and so on, very, very low intake. So really no movement in vegetable intake. Next slide. And what's also striking is I showed you that improvement, but that improvement has disparities that are persistent or even growing. And so this is looking at the same chart, the percentage of US children with a poor quality diet stratified by household income, and red is low-income households and green is high-income households. Among low-income households, almost 2/3 of kids still have a poor quality diet. But even among high-income households, almost half of kids have a poor quality diet. Next slide. And so, we have to say, well, where's this food coming from, right? When we see these some improvements, a lot of disparities, a lot of kids still having poor diets, let's start to break down where the food is coming from. And what this chart shows is the percentage of calories from different sources in the United States: schools, restaurants, grocery stores, and other sources. Please hit next. And so you can see that for schools, it's only about 9% of calories year round. Kids are only in school 180 days a year. They don't get, most of their meals in school, and many kids bring lunch to school. So schools are an important source, but it's only about 9% of calories. If you could hit next, please. The biggest source by far is grocery stores, 65% of calories, and the next biggest source is restaurants, about 20% of calories. So if we really want to make a difference in improving the nutrition of kids, there's been a lot of policy attention on schools, and that's important. We should continue to focus on schools. But grocery stores, the food that parents are buying for their kids, getting for their kids, whether it's online or retail grocery, is the biggest source of calories for kids. So that's really where we have to focus. as well. And so what's happened by food source? And so what this chart shows, again, is the percentage of kids with poor quality diets, so lower is better, by different sources. And the worst is restaurants, and this is the combination of both fast food restaurants and full service restaurants. You can see that 80% of food consumed in restaurants by kids is of poor nutritional quality, really horrifying. Grocery stores aren't that much better. Nearly half of food consumed in grocery stores or from other sources is of poor nutritional quality. And the only real bright spot is schools, where although it's 9% of calories only, there's been a tremendous improvement, and it's all happened after 2010 because of the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, the law passed by Congress, which improved nutrition standards for schools. So today, schools are actually the single healthiest place on average for kids to get food. But if you look at the orange, 65% of calories are coming from that orange, not much improvement over 20 years. And so this is a huge area to improve the retail foods available for children. Next slide. And so if we want to do that, we have to do it through systems change. When you have so many kids with poor quality diets, so many teens with obesity, diabetes, and fatty liver, the system is broken. This isn't a problem of individual choice. And so we need to advance science and research, healthcare, nutrition programs, business innovation, education and public health, and policy coordination. There's really sensible policies. And let's focus on the fourth column here, business innovation. We need to expand the market for healthy foods so that companies that are making healthier foods have more market opportunities. We need to think about new tax policy for food and nutrition innovation, where companies that are doing the right thing get tax benefits for doing so. We need to create robust, measurable metrics for environment, social, and governance investing around nutrition, so that investors have metrics for companies that are doing the right things. So they can, shift their dollars toward those companies. We need to advance BIPOC foodpreneurship, food entrepreneurs that are of, Black, Indigenous, or other people of color descent, to really make sure that food sovereignty is advanced. We have to advance the use of B Corporation status, where public companies aren't just beholden to their shareholders and more. Next slide, please. I sort of summarize some of these things here again, so we'll skip again to the next slide. And so we're trying to do this at Tufts through the Food and Nutrition Innovation Institute. We're trying to bring together an ecosystem of not only companies, but also advocacy groups and nonprofits and other university organizations to really think about creating and incubating an ecosystem where the food is healthier, more equitable, and more sustainable. And so last slide, please, go ahead. And so I'm proud to say that Tiny Organics, one of these 8 companies, is one of the signature members of our Food and Nutrition Innovation Institute. We've learned a lot from the founders, and I think they've also learned a lot from the other organizations in this system. So I think that Partnership for Healthy America has really led the way for many years in thinking about how to create an ecosystem where industry is trying to make more nourishing, more equitable, more sustainable foods, and that industry also then benefits financially from trying to do so. And so I applaud their efforts and look forward to further discussion on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mozaffarian, for really setting the stage for our discussion today and sharing exactly where things stand when it comes to childhood nutrition. Your presentation really highlights how critical those partnerships between private and public sectors are in moving the needle in the right direction in this area. A little bit about me before we launch into today's panel discussion and before I introduce the rest of the panelists. My name is Mary Ellen Shupe. I'm the Senior Correspondent for Food Navigator USA. And we cover the latest trends, innovation, policies, and regulations and nutrition research impacting the food industry. And of course, a core focus of our reporting and news coverage is on the kids' food category, including the importance those early years of a child's life are for establishing a healthy pattern of eating. And a huge takeaway is the sobering reality that kids are simply not eating enough vegetables, and it's having a major impact on their future health trajectory. Partnership for a Healthier America has been a huge resource for us as we cover this important topic, especially the white paper that expertly sums up the issue at hand and why introducing veggies early and often to children is a real solution to a real problem facing many families of all backgrounds. I'm incredibly excited and honored to be hosting and moderating PHA's Veggies Early and Often panel, which has brought together some of the best and brightest in the industry who can dig into this topic and offer ways we can work together to raise a generation of veggie lovers. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce the rest of our stellar panel. We have Diane Couchman. Diane is the Vice President of Merchandising for Giant Food. Diane leads a team of 70 high-performing category management associates that create exciting programs for Giant Food's customers. Giant Food also stays grounded in understanding the ever-changing needs of consumers. Next, we have Regina Lee Fector, who is the VP of Innovation and E-commerce at Happy Family Organics, a parent-led organic food company on a mission to change the trajectory of children's health through nutrition. Regina has led the company's innovation team for the past 7 years in launching over 120 products. Prior to Happy Family, Regina worked in strategy consulting for Bain & Company and the Bridgespan Group. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Kofi Essel, a board-certified community pediatrician at Children's National Health System in Washington, D.C. He serves as assistant professor of pediatrics at the George Washington University School of Medicine, where he is also director of culinary medicine, the community/urban health scholarly concentration, and the Clinical Public Health Summit on Obesity. Now, before we launch into our discussion, I just want to remind everyone tuning in that you can submit any questions that you have in our Q&A option on the screen, and we will be saving the last few minutes to answer some of those questions. Now, to launch into our discussion, my first question is for you, Dr. Essel. So, as a pediatrician with a busy clinic schedule, why do you take time to talk with families of young children about introducing veggies early and often? And what can support or hamper their progress?
I think it's a wonderful question. When I think about the role of food, nutrition, you all know it, diet, these are some of the leading risk factors to poor health outcomes. And we know that time and time again, we see that in the data. I think as a pediatrician, I'm inclined to believe that if we start earlier on, we can have a role in changing the trajectory of children for the long run, right? So that's something I always think about. One of the ways that I like to think about it is by really focusing in on those forgotten years, really the 0 to 2, 0 to 1 time frame. And when I talk to my colleagues, when I hear from other families and parents, they often say children are quite resilient. It doesn't really matter as much what you do in this time period. But I think that's a mistake to think that way. I think we have to be intentional to really address this critical window of time. One of the things that I get a chance to do, I'm a coalition member for the Veggies Early and Often campaign. And we've done a wonderful job in trying to get the message out far and wide. In addition, that white paper, as you've mentioned, does a great job in really beautifully describing some of the things that I'm about to mention. Some of the things that I think about more often than anything else is the whole goal of trying to get infants and young children to consume what the rest of the family eats by the age of around 2. If that's the goal for infants and young children to consume what everybody else is eating, the question is, what is everybody else eating? We know that only 1 in 10 adults is consuming enough fruit or vegetables in particular. We know that only about 1 in 10 children are also consuming enough vegetables. So what's happening? The patterns that we've used in the past, it's sort of leading our children down this pathway towards failure. So what we know we need to do is sort of change what we're doing in the forefront, sort of hit a reset button in how parents model towards children and how we recognize the importance of advancing veggies early and often. And that's why I do it. I push this forward, recognizing this is a new pattern, a new approach to create healthier, more adventurous palates for the long run for our families.
Fantastic. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, working in a clinic, what are some of those common pain points that you hear from families and parents about that early vegetable introduction? What do they struggle with the most?
So I would say one of the toughest things is flavor, right? The individuals have gotten used to their own patterns of eating over time, right? We all have gotten used to our own patterns of eating. So for example, a parent may hate broccoli. And so when they give broccoli that first time to that child, the infant makes a face. It doesn't seem to really gravitate towards that food. So the initial response is, that child must hate broccoli because I myself hate broccoli. Instead of recognizing the role, the malleability of the palate, and how if you introduce foods multiple times, that child will adapt to those different foods. It's about recognizing the role that parents and families play in influencing and modeling behaviors for their young children. And that's one of the biggest factors that's a pain point for families. And there's a lot more. Biggest challenges around food insecurity, time, convenience, being able to allow families to be able to access healthy, nutritious foods, to live active and healthy lifestyles. These are some of the things we see time and time again.
Fantastic. And then just one follow-up question for you, Dr. Essel, and just talking about the white paper, because a lot of that great information is in there. You know, from your point of view, what would be a great takeaway for someone reading that white paper about this whole veggies early and often mission that we're on?
Another great important question. I think one of the things that I really love to highlight with my families more than anything else is that role of repetition, right? That role of, it can take up to 8 to 10 tries of that food before that infant, that child may adapt to that food. There are a lot of flavors early on that children don't naturally gravitate towards. We know that we all have a natural predilection for sugar, for sweet, for salt, but not necessarily for flavors like bitter and sour and umami. So we have this critical window of time early on. We talk about the idea of flavor training, recognizing the role of the 4 to 6 month window where you can give small tastes, not whole foods, but small tastes to a child, and taking advantage of those first few months to introduce a variety of different flavors and recognizing the role of doing it multiple times so children do adapt to those foods. So then you create a palate that's adventurous for the long run.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Essel. So this is a question for everyone on the panel today. What's the role of industry to ensure equity and offer helpful approaches to raise healthy, adventurous eaters? So a big question there. Regina, I'm wondering if you could take that one, just from your point of view at Happy Family Organics.
Sure, yeah, and I think the data that was shared earlier really shows that it's across all of our parts of the industry, whether it's, you know, baby packaged food, which I represent, the rest of the grocery store, food service, because, you know, as we know, I think Happy Family Organics, we take it extremely personally, you know, myself as a parent, and then just our mission, as we all have the missions to change the trajectory of children's health through nutrition, to really raise the bar here. But I think that it's not just, I think a lot of people will say, we need just better baby food, better packaged baby food, less fruit forward, more veggie options there. And I think it really is about all of us coming to the table with those better options, and then also helping to educate families, as Dr. Essel just said. And it's funny, one of the products we just launched as part of our partnership with PHA is a broccoli and carrot with a hint of garlic product, you know, and to the point of, you know, broccoli is something that not a lot of families, doesn't really exist out in the store. And so where do you really say, there are 5 options of sweet potato, these are things that exist in the market, but we want to actually provide gaps, and then also just really help to educate families in ways that are really memorable and fun, and not making this hard. It's, being a parent is really hard and really tiring, and people have very little time to focus on this. So we all just need to make it easier for parents and babies to eat more veggies.
Fantastic. I want to give everyone else an opportunity to react to that question before I move on to another question for Regina. Does anyone else have anything to add about the role industry can play to ensure equity and offer helpful approaches to raise healthy and adventurous eaters?
So I can kind of speak on this a little bit from our retail environment. You know, I really think that we have the responsibility to ensure we have distinct assortment that reflects the current need state of our baby food customer. So we must add value so mom can meet her budget and still offer nutrient-dense food for her infants and toddlers. For baby food, value isn't necessarily about what you pay, it's more about what you get. So our generations of moms right now are adventurous in their own eating in a lot of ways. And we need to ensure that we have baby food variety that reflects that kind of adventurous eating. So trends that we're seeing right now are in the way of stuff like kale, chickpeas, millet, and quinoa. So it's our responsibility in the retail environment to ensure that we have those offerings for our moms.
Yeah, and just from Dr. Mossafarian's presentation, the role the grocery store plays in the diet. I think, school is an important environment, but certainly the grocery store needs to be that parent-friendly destination that can have those options ready for families.
And
100%. I can comment as well. I can comment as well. I think it's an excellent question. So I think first, the responsibility has to be real, not a marketing responsibility. And there's a lot of companies who, across the spectrum of food, across the spectrum of all goods in the country, where it's more marketing than true responsibility. And so I think there has to be a genuine commitment from the top from the company. I think one, there has to be science that in the healthfulness. So just saying, well, our product has X, Y, or Z nutrient, so it's more healthful, is not appropriate. There has to be minimally processed, bioactive rich foods that is really what we know are good for health. And from what I know about some of these companies, I think that's what they're trying to do, is to create minimally processed foods and put them in ways that babies can eat. I think that's a third key responsibility. I have 4 on my list. The third key one is to be sure to not compete in any way with breastfeeding, right? And so this is supposed to be a complementary food introduced later, to be sure that all the marketing and promotion makes sure that this is a complementary food. Breastfeeding, or for women that can't breastfeed, of course, they're gonna use formula. And I think the last thing that's really important, you asked about equity, is that right now these are generally more premium products than the average low-income American can afford. And that's tough, because these are products that are innovative, that are using healthier ingredients, that are using more natural processing systems often, and so they're more expensive. And so I think that's where government has a role to play, because if you just leave it to the market, then these products will come out, and the companies will have, especially small companies, will have a tough time pricing them at points that low-income Americans can afford, who maybe need them the most, as my data and others have shown. And so I think government has to step in and reward companies that do well, use SNAP dollars, use WIC dollars, use healthcare dollars to pay for these products, use all kinds of ways to make sure that these products are affordable. So I think equity is a joint government industry responsibility.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Dr.
Add
Essel.
one other piece on top of that. I think that's the perfect thing that I was going to add on. I think we cannot worsen disparity. We should not worsen the disparity that already exists, right? When you look at some of these past studies, looking at families, particularly who may be using food stamps in particular, when they say some of the challenges to consuming healthy foods, number one, of course, the cost of healthy foods, and a little bit further down is time. Right, the ability and the opportunity to manufacture time is really hard for families. So by having accessible, cost-effective, flavorful foods that families can access and pay for, I think this is really important, that all families can be able to enjoy these nutritious foods, right? So I think that's another big part that I often think about with this.
Yeah, and I would love to pull Regina in here, because this is so much of the work that you're doing at Happy Family, to increase that access to these really veggie forward products. So my question for you is, if you could just briefly talk about your commitment that you made to PHA as part of the Veggies Early and Often initiative, and how these actions will do what we're talking about, increase the availability and accessibility of veggie forward options for families.
Yeah, of course. So our team started working with PHA over a year ago, and it took us months to really draft, and to the point of scientifically led, based in the DGAs, a lot of the gaps that Dr. Mossafarian was talking about really was the baseline for what we put together. And so the 3 pillars that we are following and are really challenging ourselves to raise the bar over the next 3 years are nutrition, first and foremost, food accessibility, and then the third one is education. And so when it comes to nutrition, we have, and this is all on our website, on PHA's website, we are going to promote vegetable consumption by doubling the number of our purees with only veggies. And I think this is key, because to the point of in America, we like to mix flavors much more than in Europe, where it's much more common to see a vegetable only product, but that does add the sweetness and detract from the taste development. And so, you know, again, this is, I have products all around me, but this is a sweet potato led product with a hint of rosemary and olive oil. And so we are, you know, really innovating within veggies in a way that inspires a bit of that culinary, how you might cook at home, and hoping that that really helps to unlock some growth in the market there. We're also increasing the number of our products with over 50% of veggies. So I would say this is the market today. The products that say scream veggies, well, most of them have 50% or probably less in them. So I think that, you know, as an industry, that's where we need to raise the bar. And then we've committed to saying all of our toddler meal bowls, these are meant to be meals, must have at least 50% veggies. And 50% veggies is really delivering on a quarter cup, which is one of the 4 servings per day. So to the point of, we're only getting a quarter of the way to that goal with one of our products. And we know that only 1 in 10 children are hitting that cup a day. And then on the food access side, for us, it's all about using our products for good. So we've committed to 1 million, you know, snacks and meals of donations over the next 3 years that we're tracking. This year alone, we've already donated 240,000. So I think our team is really proud of that. And then really supporting the WIC to the point of accessibility. The WIC program, you know, 45% of families, babies born in this country, are born into the WIC income bracket of less than 50,000 for a family of 4. And so over our journey over the past 3 years as a company, since we launched our jar purees, we've seen the number of states approving organic go from 12 to 29, which we've, you know, we're really proud to be a company that's helped to really, you know, push and be there during the WIC conferences and really explain why organic is something that parents want as an option, and should have that option, just like anyone walking into the grocery store. And now that 64% of WIC families have access to organic foods. So I think that's a really positive story. And we're actually also seeing that 4 states through WIC now accept pouches. And the baby food industry, you know, is both in cups and jars, but also in pouches as the convenience. So I think we're going to be seeing more states leaning into pouches, because that is where sort of consumers are going. And then just finally, I would say, when it comes to education, you know, starting solids is very confusing to parents. Dr. Essel was talking, you know, there's so many questions. I think that people think they know, and then they are going through the motions themselves. And so how do we, you know, myself as a brand, representing a brand, we have social channels, we drive marketing. And again, marketing is not the solution, but it is part of the narrative and the explaining. And so, you know, how do we talk about veggies early and often, the 8 to 10 times of trial that it can take to learn to love broccoli. I mean, that's one of our biggest things. That's the aha unlock that we consistently tell parents, because that is something that most parents don't know. And so I would say, like, our brand and the industry continues to just, it feels like people maybe are learning that, but I think it's new news to most families across the board.
Certainly, yes. And thank you for walking through what Happy Family is doing in really actionable ways. And expanding access is just like a huge part of all of this. So just moving on to this next question that I actually have for you, Dr. Mozaffarian. Based on the research and, you know, where we stand today, you painted a really clear picture of the childhood nutrition, the state of things now. Can we imagine what the poster child for veggies early and often will grow up to eat and be like? So yeah, what would that child look like and eat like?
Yeah, well, so, you know, obviously the earlier we start, the better. The first 1,000 days being critical, then through, you know, age 5 being critical, and then through adolescence for setting up lifelong habits. I do want to say that I've heard some scientists say that it is essential, and that if we don't do it, you're lost. And I want to emphasize that that's not true. People at age 75 can switch to a healthier diet and see health benefits. So it's not as though we should give up on everyone else. But But the more we can get kids to be healthier now and enjoying healthy food now, we're setting them up for success later for lifelong good habits. There's very clear evidence that that's true. And the converse is what's happening. So right now, kids have the worst diets in this country, not the best diets. And so what we see today among 40 and 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds for the health epidemic of overweight, obesity, diabetes, hypertension is going to be much, much worse in 20 years because we have kids and teens today that are growing up with fatty liver and overweight and prediabetes from being teenagers. So I think what we would want to see is, kids and of course their whole families who are enjoying, optimally processed, because we need food processing of some kind, optimally processed foods that are phenolic rich, bioactive rich, nurture our microbiomes, nurture our health, and are sustainable and are convenient. We're not going to, I think to Dr. Essel's comments, we're not going to return to a world of 3-hour, cooking every night from our home gardens in the back. Like that's just a elitist dream that we're going to ever get there, right? We need to have immediate, convenient foods that fit into really busy families' lives. And so we need to figure out all those things. I don't think we have all the science figured out, so I can't, say exactly what the food's going to look like, but I think those are the broad strokes. It needs to be optimally processed, phenolic rich, real food rich, convenient, inexpensive, accessible, and of course, tastes great. On top of that, yeah.
Yeah, and just to follow up there, from where you sit, what is the biggest barrier or opportunity to raise more veggie lovers? I think we've touched on it in a few different areas, but what are the barriers and who are the allies that will really need support from to be successful in this mission? Well,
the food system is, wicked complex. I can say that being in Boston now for 18 years, not with the right accent, but the food system is wicked complex. And so there's no one solution that's going to fix things. We can't just say, okay, we're just going to improve SNAP, or we're just going to improve school lunch, or we're just going to do a soda tax, or we're just going to launch new veggie products for kids and we're going to fix everything. It's just not going to happen. So we really need to look at the whole system. And we have done this. And I think there are 6 domains of actions, and we have to do all of the actions to catalyze all this forward. Number 1 is science and research. There's so much we still don't understand. And our investment in science research nationally now is at about the same level as a percentage as it was 40 years ago. And it's dismal. And so literally we can send a man or woman to the moon, and we don't have enough science to know if cheese is good or bad for us for health, right? That's actually unknown. Is cheese a health food? Is cheese bad for us? We don't know. So we need to advance nutrition science, number 1. We need a moonshot, a real major federal investment in nutrition science. 2, we have to leverage our existing federal nutrition investments, SNAP, WIC, school lunch, Meals on Wheels. WIC is excellent. But SNAP and school lunch is pretty good. But SNAP in particular has to be leveraged better for nutrition in lots of ways. Number 3, we have to leverage healthcare dollars. So when you go to the doctor, he doesn't just pay for a diabetes drug for a teenager with type 2 diabetes. And some of the new diabetes drugs, by the way, are $5,000 or $10,000 per year per drug. These are not cheap drugs, as Dr. Essel, I'm sure knows. And so we have to leverage healthcare dollars so your doctor and your healthcare payer can actually pay for healthy eating, including for toddlers. Number 4, we have to advance public health and education. And so we have to leverage the power of the FDA, the power of the CDC, the power of surveillance, the power of education in schools, education for healthcare providers, a lot more. Number 5, business innovation. Governments, as I mentioned, as I showed in my slides, government needs to actively catalyze food innovation. We did that for green energy. We've done it very successfully for green energy. We've done it for other industries. We've done it for railroads. We've done it for agriculture. We've done it for cars. It's time to do it for food. The government has to really catalyze this. And lastly, we have to coordinate all this. We have to have a plan. There are the U.S. Government Accountability Office, the GAO, which is the government watchdog, put out a report just a few weeks ago saying that there are 200 different federal policies to improve nutrition fragmented across 21 agencies that are not working together. And their main recommendation was for Congress to create or direct a new federal authority to coordinate food policy. We need a national office of food and nutrition to actually coordinate federal food policy. So I think, across those 6 domains, and business innovation is one important one, I think we can fix food.
That's, yeah, well, thank you for running through all that. And the coordination is the key aspect, but if we're motivated enough, hopefully we can really rally around this. So I just want to keep things moving and bring you and Diane to offer this retail perspective, because retail is a huge part of this conversation. So center store success continues for grocers. Is baby food part of your roadmap to gain and retain customers? And what nudges or strategies can retailers like Giant Food use to drive parent demand for veggie-forward baby and toddler options?
Absolutely. So for the past 3 years, Giant Food has seen continued sales growth within the baby food category. So natural purees, natural cereal, natural juices are all leading that growth. Having natural and organic offerings for mom is essential. Baby food is the entry point really for all organic consumers. Baby food is one of the most developed and organic categories, and organic is the first choice on the baby food decision tree. So this category is very important to Giant Food. We'll continue to work with our suppliers to ensure we have all the new and better tasting products that mom and baby need. And we'll continue to create fun programs either through our e-com platform or a brick and mortar experience. Retailers should work with our suppliers to not only market, but tell the Veggie First story on social media platforms. Now for us, social media will play a big role in how moms approach the baby food aisle. Products like Happy Baby and Once Upon a Farm are all great brands that foster better nutrition and wholesomeness. That's what moms want. At Giant, leveraging our social media will be the key driver to first show mom that the wholesome products she wants are there and available and affordable. It's equally as important to have resources where moms can have a two-way communication. How does what she's reading and seeing relate to her family, and how can we make that work for her budget? At Giant, we're really fortunate to have a team of experts, registered dietitians, who can help parents work through these questions and help them make those decisions.
Great. So yes, it seems like there are a number of programs that Giant Food has really kind of, innovated, and you're more than just a grocery retail store. You're a resource too, which is, I think, part of that shopping consumer experience. And so I want to move on to Regina, again. So Happy Family is one of the 8 Veggies early and often partners, great group there. Hopefully it'll keep expanding, that are prioritizing veggie forward SKUs. What are the top considerations as a brand in terms of product development for you? And how can retailers create a supportive environment for a veggie forward approach?
Yeah, so I would say, as was voiced a bit already, great taste and great packaging. And I will, again, I love this particular packaging that is modern. It pops. Vegetables are beautiful and can look beautiful on shelf and can pop and grab the eye for the average consumer, parent aside. 3 seconds is all you have to make a purchase decision at shelf. So I think we recognize us as a brand with packaged products and retailers being able to use shelf signage. Often stores are very clean store policy, but how do we highlight vegetables? More like sometimes we see highlighted cereals or formulas or things like that, but can we lean into highlighting vegetables? And so I think the reflection point that our team has had, I've been at Happy Family over the last 7 years, that veggie only products don't turn as well when you look at dollars per store per week. And so ultimately speaking, when you just look at the business metrics that are going to dictate what stays in store, what doesn't, this is the dilemma. Ultimately things, and why is that? Lots of reasons that parents aren't trying it or they're not repeat buying it because they think that their babies don't like it. And so this is where it truly is a partnership between, Diane and myself to say, we're going to give, number one, we're going to lean into products that are really great and parents are going to love. And number two, we're going to give it a runway of a year to really prove itself. And I will say that, we are so proud that this line of the line is called Savory Blends, with the blend of the veggies plus the good fat, is outperforming half of our fruit portfolio, right? So it's in the top half of our portfolio right now, and it's outperforming a lot of the products out there that are only 50% veggies. So we actually are seeing, and again, when we are driving, and then the other piece that you need to deliver as a brand is the fuel of marketing. And so we've delivered 15 million impressions when you look at just across different articles and bloggers and influencers to really get awareness out there, because otherwise people won't really find the product unless they happen to be walking down the aisle and see that broccoli and gravitate towards it. So yeah, I think that there's a lot more that really needs to happen, and across the industry need to lean in more, because when we look at the fruit versus veggie percentage of the shelf, it is still very much an unbalanced portfolio there.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point to make between that brand and retailer relationship. And it's, I think in the past, it is highly transactional. The retailer wants products that are selling and turning, and Diane, you probably have perspective on this, but to allow for that, as you said, runway, that patience to really incorporate and integrate into families' weekly shopping routines and allow them to continue to repurchase. And so Diane, do you have anything to comment on anything with what Regina said about that partnership?
So I think it's all about balance most of the time, right? So when we're in the grocery store and we think about the whole baby aisle, there are ways to be able to balance the things that we want to be able to push and items that we want to foster and bring along that may not necessarily be turning. We absolutely can. We can work with our suppliers to be able to create that balance. It's not always about deleting it out after 6 months. Trust me, we can be very selective in what we pick and choose and what we put on counter. So between what we do in brick and mortar and what we do through e-com, I think that we can be very strategic in how we talk to our customers and help mom make these really hard decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and the other point I would just add is that in addition to vegetables, and I think as the dietary guidelines has shown us, 2 other pieces of our commitments around nutrient quality are around no added sugar to the purees and bowls, and no added salt, because I would say there is more salt and sugar hidden in the grocery store in general, again, in American food, but in the baby food aisle. And so what are the commitments that the different players are making on the veggie side, but then also on those other key, the whole grain side as well, because those are other places where we all just need to write something down, put it on our webs, commit to it, and then have it be the high bar that drives our teams and makes decisions helps us make decisions.
Yeah, and hopefully that really is going to create this new standard of baby food that people, seek out, and that's just table stakes eventually. So, okay, so I want to leave enough time for Q&A, but wanted to end off on this, fill in the blank sentence here, and I'm just going to go around the virtual room here. But so complete this sentence: the future of the baby and toddler food landscape is blank. Dr. Essel, why don't you take a stab at that one if you can?
It's bright and should and will be available to all communities, no matter culture or income.
Lovely. Anyone else? Diane?
For me, I think it's ever changing, right? Consumers are buying more and more organic, and we really have to pay attention to wholesome. And what can wholesome mean? It doesn't necessarily mean organic, but it can be local, sustainable. We really have to pay attention to what moms want and see it through that wholesome lens.
Yeah. And Dr. Masfarian or Regina, do you have?
I would say it's critical to get right for our kids for the future.
Yeah.
And I'll just say it's nutritious organic food, and then parents that feel empowered to really, practice healthy eating with their babies and toddlers, and that, meal occasion. And that just something fun to share that you can't tell on Zoom, but I'm also delivering a future child in a couple of weeks. So this is very near and dear to my heart personally, that I need the struggles of veggie eating from my current and my future baby are real. So it's going to be taking these into my personal practice too.
Well, thank you for being here so close to the big day. And, okay, so we have some great questions rolling in here. This one is actually specifically for Regina/Diane. I'm going to start with this one. How do we continue to encourage the importance of veggies with all of the congressional news related to heavy metals? I mean, this is an area that Food Navigator USA has covered extensively. Our editor, Elaine Watson, is constantly writing about this. Another lawsuit just keeps coming up. But, how do has that hindered this mission at all? The issue of heavy metals appearing? And I know there's a lot of different ways to look at this.
Diane,
for
you gonna go? Yeah.
for me,
Go first.
so for me as a retailer, I'm always going to be looking to my subject matter experts to help me navigate these waters. And it's always going to be over to Regina, right? They're the ones that are really supplying us with the product. So I'm almost 900% going to take their lead. So for me, I'm always going to be looking to see how we want to tell that story to our consumers from my suppliers.
Great.
I'll punt it over to you, Regina.
Yeah, no, so I think that I would say, the awareness around heavy metals, and specifically heavy metals that are coming from the soil. So a sweet potato, number one vegetable consumed in the baby food aisle, sweet potato grown in the soil, is something that I think alarmed a lot of families, because they said, wait a second, can I not feed sweet potato to my baby anymore in a packaged food format? I'm going to go buy it from the fresh produce aisle, not recognizing that a sweet potato is a sweet potato. And actually, we are very transparent on our website with, our quality and contaminants, processes and what we do for testing and all of that. And so we take it extremely personally, again, as parents, that we're complying with all of the standards and also leaning into the FDA's closer to zero, plan going forward, because, we believe that there should be more regulation, absolutely, in the space. And there should be more testing and monitoring. But I think just letting parents know that baby food is absolutely safe, and that we're all striving for stricter standards is kind of the place we go. And again, I would just say a lot of the brands are sharing a lot on our sites and different channels. And so we are available, our brand, people call us to ask questions around this as well. So people are available for concerned parents that have questions around that.
Yeah, I mean, transparency is key. And I feel like, these brands, including Happy Family, have been extremely transparent about, what they're doing. So sorry to stick with you one more question, Regina, but there are a few questions about, and someone's congratulating you on the baby, about the shelf stable baby food. And the question specifically from Bruce here is nutritional quality of shelf stable consumer. Does it really help? Nutritional quality of shelf-stable consumer packaged goods, does it really help eating habits for families and children, specifically products? Or, okay, this is a better phrased one. How beneficial do you feel a household consumer product that extends the shelf life of fresh produce by 500% with regard to eating habits / families? So I think the question is around, can you get the same nutritional quality from a shelf-stable product? And I'll let you take that.
Sure. Yeah. No, and again, I get it. I get the whole question of, a pouch that has 12 months of shelf life is older than my baby, and that as a perception factor can be hard for some people. I think what I would say is, and again, my daughter eats a pouch a day, is, hot fill or retort. The processing that we use is cooking our food at, anywhere from 180 degrees to higher for the retort processing. For a limited amount of time, 10 to 20 minutes. And so when you think about how you're cooking food at home, And then we're the way that you make something shelf stable is often through the pH balancing and having vitamin C. And so again, from a nutrition perspective, the nutrition is there. And I would say fresh food, the heating does degrade vitamin C very specifically. But when you think about other nutrients, the same way that when you cook at home, there is some degradation of some nutrients as well. I would say the reality is our products, and per any regulation, FDA, what we have on our facts panel is 100% what our product tests for at the end of our shelf life. So you can look to see, and sweet potatoes are unsurprisingly delivering on a lot of vitamin A. And so I would say that's just where, it's this balance of convenience and families absolutely wanting to cook homemade, wanting to buy fresher food, but fresher food is more expensive. What's available in food deserts? Not a lot of fresh food, I would say also. So that's where we've actually focused a lot of our donation strategies, like getting our products out into places that in particular could use a really nutritious form of shelf stable food.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I just want to fit in another question here. I think, Dr. Essel, you may be best placed to answer this, just based on your experience working with parents in the clinic and as a health professional and doctor. So is a perceptive barrier to vegetable consumption at the baby/toddler age the eating habits of parents? So if a parent doesn't like broccoli or spinach or what have you, is that a barrier for kids? Are the kids less likely to eat it? Or is that something that needs to be like a learned behavior, is to introduce these products to your children that maybe you didn't love, but you could change their taste preferences that way?
The likelihood of introducing foods that you don't love, and it's less likely, right? Like most of the time, families are going to bring in foods that they love, right? With the idea that they're given little small pieces of flavors and foods that they eat anyway, right? Like it's just breaking small pieces, giving those foods anyway. So it's all about that process that's happening. So it's unlikely that families are bringing in a ton of different foods that they don't typically eat. This is a learned behavior in part, right? Like a part of my role and responsibility is getting my families to expand the palate of the child by encouraging flavors that they may not have eaten before, that they may not have consumed before. I do recognize that modeling is a big part of this process, but it's important. I used the word before, reset. This is an opportunity for parents and caretakers to hit a reset button, not only to start to do stuff differently for themselves, but also for their children as well.
Yes. And I just want to address a question that I misunderstood here. And again, that is from Bruce. So he's saying a new product under development would extend fresh produce shelf life by 500%. Would this help the overall market in eating better? So kind of a flipped perspective on, these are really healthy, nutritious products that are still shelf stable. So Regina, do you think that would move the needle here with these kind of more of these products being available?
Yeah, and I would say again, I think the fresh supply chain is a very difficult one. So to extend shelf life in the fresh aisle grocery by 500%, it would be a huge breakthrough, in my opinion.
Okay, and then final, sorry, cut you off. Final question here before we wrap things up. Why should more baby and toddler food companies and retailers get on board to veggies early and often, and just veggie forward products in general? And that question is for everyone.
From my perspective, the sooner we bring moms in and give her everything that she wants, and that includes eating vegetables first, I have a customer for life. And that's really what I want. I want mom to have everything she needs. I want to be able to provide everything she needs in the store as she's shopping, whether it's fresh produce or whether it's freshly made baby food. I'd love to have it, because once I bring her in, then she shops with her children. I shopped with my mom. I still shop at Giant today. To me, it's a huge, huge plus, huge win.
Okay, so I would love to hear everyone else's perspective, but I'm afraid we are running out of time. But by no means is this the end of the conversation. I want to thank all of our panelists and everyone tuning in for taking part in this event. And if there's one thing we're hoping everyone here has taken away from today's discussion, it would be PHA's call to action for industry, which is this: offer affordable veggie-forward baby and toddler product options. That's it. If you are a food industry leader from a manufacturer, CPG, or major retailer who believes in and is committed to the same things as PHA's Veggies Early and Often campaign, get in touch about becoming a partner in this work. And as a reminder, all of today's participants will receive a follow-up email later today from PHA with a recording of today's webinar and copy of PHA's research paper. And of course, to learn more, please visit PHA's website at ahealthieramerica.org. And lastly, just want to say, if this is a topic that interests you and you would like to explore it more, I want to invite everyone to tune into Food Navigator USA's Food for Kids 2-part interactive broadcast series. The first portion of the event will focus on early childhood nutrition and is taking place tomorrow, November 10th at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. And then next week on November 17th, we'll explore the area of kids snacks. So you can register for both those events at foodnavigatorusasummit.com. Thank you again, everyone, for your time today. And it was a pleasure to host this panel.